had a wonderful conversation with Aaron Stonehouse a couple of benches ago,
Yeah.
and he talks about his election night. He was asleep because he didn't think he had any chance of getting in.
Yeah.
You weren't asleep. You were actually helping count the votes for other people to get elected. What went through your mind then when the realisation dawned? Sorry, before it dawned.
Yeah.
When you were told, "Oh, you're in."
It was, oh my God, what do I do now? This is going to be one of my longest jobs ever. 4 years, and I've got to stick with it and be effective.
There goes that free spirit.
Yeah, to a degree. But having said that, getting elected to Mining and Pastoral, 2.24 million square kilometres of the most beautiful country that we've got in Western Australia, I'm free. I've got the Canning Stock Route, I've got the remote Aboriginal communities, I've got the Kimberley, I've got Ningaloo Reef. Who wouldn't want to get elected for the electorate?
Just for some of our audience who might not be from Western Australia, I mean, you've touched on the size of your electorate, 2.2 million square kilometres. That's Britain, France, Spain, Italy, Germany.
Yep, the whole of Europe.
Wrapped together.
Yeah. Any other place in the world, it would be half a dozen countries.
Does that, yet your electorate is just shy of 70,000?
Yeah. And
people.
And 56 odd maybe vote. So very, very small. If I'm out in the pastoral country, it's a good 400 kilometres between houses. So that's the distance. And you've got to remember that you've got Kalgoorlie, which is a distinct population, very mining focused, very historic. You've got Port Hedland, again mining, but very new. You've got the Kimberley, which is very, very old, very traditional, 40% Aboriginal population up there, real strong culture. It is half a dozen countries. And I actually have to deal with each of those areas quite distinctly.
So is there such a thing as an overarching theme or need for your constituents, or can you not approach it that way? Do you have to make sure that what suits Kalgoorlie doesn't suit Ningaloo, doesn't suit Broome, doesn't suit Port Hedland?
Well, my view is that I think on some issues about regional support, that's generic. But everything else, different climate, different sets of conditions, different housing, different style of lifestyle, it is quite distinct. So you really do have to, I don't say tailor your message, you don't change your message, but you deal with messaging that is appropriate to the area. Port Hedland, Karratha, it's very much about fly in, fly out. The Kimberley, it's very much about culture and heritage. Kalgoorlie is very much about making sure that Kalgoorlie, which is also a third of the electorate, gets the services they need. They're one of the biggest centres in Western Australia outside Perth. So Kalgoorlie Boulder, you've got to cater for almost a I can't get the word out, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Metrocentric.
Yep.
You've got to get that sort of issue. It's very much about a metropolitan style environment in Kalgoorlie.
How do you keep on track of, on top of, I should say, all those issues? Because yes, it makes sense that infrastructure is probably one of those overarching issues. Culture in general, First Nations in general probably is too, but then within that, of course, you've got totally different issues by region. Environment maybe?
Look, environment, that's quite different in all those different areas. I mean, Kimberley, the least spoilt wilderness anywhere in the world.
So important everywhere, but different degrees of...
That's right. So you then come down to the Pilbara, where I'm talking with mining companies, Rio, BHP, about environmental management, end of mine life closure plans, those sorts of things. So it's environment, but it's completely different sort of subset. In Kalgoorlie, it's usually the disparity between small miners and big miners. There seems to be a huge problem in that area around those issues. How do I keep track of it? Well, I suppose I've learnt. I'm very lucky. I've been in Parliament for 12 years, but actually been there 16 if you count that little break in the middle there. So longevity enables you to gain a deep understanding of the regions. And so I suppose that comes with time. Initially I knew the Pilbara. I mean, that's where I came from when I first got elected. Really didn't know the Kimberley, where I now live. Had very little to do with Kalgoorlie. But over time, my relationship and my ability to work in those areas has improved because I've learnt more. Everything in life, going back to that whole free spirit, is a matter of learning. So I can continue to learn, and I will never stop learning. And so I learn the electorate more and more as I go, and you learn the nuances of who the key players are and who's with whom and how, and that's very much a local issue, but you've got to do that over 2.24 million square kilometres.
How many kilometres would you travel each year on electoral matters? And there's a lot of flying, appreciate that, but
Yep.
I'm sure also a lot of gravel.
I have a vehicle out there which is fairly famous. It's been stolen once and used in a ram raid. I recently hit a cow in it.
How's the
has
cow?
a lot of repairs. The cow totaled.
Steak.
Wish I'd had a decent sharp knife with me, but I didn't. But it's difficult to work out. But when Parliament's not sitting, most of the time I'll be out there somewhere. Now, if it's, I leave the vehicle somewhere. It's at the moment it's in Karratha. I'll be flying up to Karratha at the end of this 2-week sitting, pick up the vehicle, and I'll head to the Kimberley. And I'll be stopping all along the way. Now, I recently had an issue with the ATO. They couldn't understand how I was doing all these kilometres, so they wanted to know who I'd met with all the way. And I'm saying, well, mostly 50 to 100 people, popping into a pastoral station, you know, catching up with a mayor here or there or wherever, and talking to constituents. I am not going to keep a record of every person I meet. It would be impossible. So I do meet with a lot of people, but I don't do the race rounds, that sort of thing. That's not my scene. I'll roll up and talk to people I know. They've said, Joe Bloggs has got a problem. I recently did some work for a guy, 101 years old, in Karratha, who was having trouble getting a phone. And he'd tried everything to get his phone reconnected. So that was my little bandwagon for it. And I got his phone fixed, got it all on, and really happy. So that's some of the minutiae that I deal with. And that's what I see my role as being, is actually helping people on the ground dealing with those little issues. Obviously you've got the big policy issues that I deal with in Parliament.
So just in terms of local issues and local constituents, seeing that that electorate is being represented by a number of different parties, how much collaboration is there between the reps and the upper and the lower house in that part of the world? And I'm thinking also around maybe some infrastructure or you know, transport coordination or...
Very little. And there's most probably more relationship between upper house Liberals and their Liberal counterparts in the lower house, obviously because they've got a connection. But you've got to remember that WA Parliament sort of sets itself up to be independent upper house and independent lower house. And I've seen many battles over the 16 years that I've been there where the upper house is telling the lower house, you know, to go and get whatever. There is a huge, there's a political divide between the upper house and the lower house, and it always has been. And I find that quite fascinating. So I remember a member who moved from the lower house to the upper house had moved a motion in the lower house bemoaning the fact that we had afternoon tea and we actually had a break, whereas they had afternoon tea and they didn't have a break. So he comes up to the upper house and the president calls him to one side and says, for the first week you don't get afternoon tea. So, you know, even at a juvenile level, there is that divide.
How's politics changed in the house up the road here, the big house, since 2001, since you were first elected? What changes have you seen?
Okay, I think most probably politics is politics. And we train people in politics. I go to youth parliament and I sometimes sort of run that as their president. And I actually have to tell them to stop saying "here, here," because they think that's what everybody does in parliament, or interjecting and calling people nasty names, because that's not what really parliament is about. That's politics, the theatre. We have debates once a week called private members' time, where one party will get up and either commend themselves on the work they have done or blame the other side for the work they haven't done. And we waste 80 minutes a week on doing that. And we do it every week. And I'm sure that the motions are repetitive and have been repetitive for the last 16 years. I think we should get on with the business. And because it's not reported, it doesn't generate any media, it doesn't go back to constituents, it is just egos standing up and shouting at each other. And that, I don't think, is good governance.